We are now a week out from the grand jury decision on Eric Garner, 2 weeks out from that concerning Michael Brown. So we've covered a few polls. What are Americans thinking about those grand jury decisions? In particular here, we're going to focus on some of the differences in how white Americans and black Americans have responded to those grand juries. So let's bring up this chart. What you're seeing here is information culled from a Bloomberg Politics poll. You're seeing there that when it comes to Michael Brown, about 24-25% of white Americans disagree with the grand jury, the decision that made so that there would be no indictment of Darren Wilson. Obviously, more than 80% of black Americans disagreeing with that decision. You're seeing pretty stark contrast for the white figure when it comes to Eric Garner. Over 40%, almost, no, that's over 50%, saying that they disagree, white Americans, with...
I think it was 52.
52%. And again, very consistent numbers for black Americans. And so there's a lot of different reasons that we can sort of guess or interpret why it is that whites feel so differently about the Michael Brown and the Eric Garner decisions there. I can only say that I personally hope that those white Americans who were unconvinced with the performance put up by McCulloch in the grand jury concerning Michael Brown, perhaps with Eric Garner, that will stimulate some empathy, some desire to see a systemic change in how the police interact with that community. That would be something good coming out of that.
There are a lot of things good that can come out of it. The best thing that come out of it is that fewer black people were killed by police officers, unarmed black people killed by police officers. The body cameras will help. But what John didn't mention, the video was the key component.
We're gonna get to that. We have the NYPD Police Chief Bratton talking about the video, about how obviously how difficult it is for most people watching that video, actually watching Eric Garner killed by a policeman. Let's watch.
How did you feel, Commissioner, you personally, when you saw this video and you heard him 11 times say, "I can't breathe"? That must have been a hard thing for you as the commissioner to watch.
Well, I don't think that anybody that watches that video is not disturbed by what they saw. That policing involving use of force is, it always looks awful. We have an expression, lawful but awful. The criminal courts have decided, the district attorney's grand jury has decided there were no criminal actions involved. We're now going to have to see if the actions the officers engaged in were in violation of our policies and procedures. Civil rights investigation will determine if there are any violations of his civil rights.
I know we've seen that video over and over and over again, but he's just standing like this, and they look like they have to they're trying to take down a tank with their bare hands.
Yeah, he knocked their hands.
Just climbing on top of him.
He knocked their hands away. But it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
all
that's
he did was
something.
He looked like he thought he was engaged in an argument with police, and then he was dead. So the difference in the 52% of whites thinking that there should have been an indictment in the Garner case obviously has to do with the fact that there was video in that case, and
yes.
There wasn't video, and there was eyewitness testimony, and it's conflicting eyewitness testimony in the Michael Brown case. I think the Michael Brown case is actually more compelling, but we don't know what would happen because he was not an incompetent district attorney. We don't know. He didn't try. He had no interest in getting an indictment against the police officer, against Darren Wilson at all. He made no effort, behaved unlike he behaves and every other prosecutor behaves in every grand jury ever. He made no effort to get an indictment. In fact, he deliberately obfuscated the facts by throwing all the evidence at the grand jurors and then hiding behind throwing all the evidence at the grand jurors. Like, hey, I gave him everything. How can you be mad at me? But that's not how a grand jury works.
And encouraging them not to indict.
He also didn't need a grand jury. He just could have indicted. So he just could have charged. Like, when somebody is caught with blood all over their hands and a knife in their hands and their dead spouse at their feet, they don't take it to a grand jury.
Yeah, but the district attorney and the police are like that.
And that's the issue.
I mean, they're tied at the hip.
And of course, the other thing that worked against, real quick about the video, and then the Michael Brown case, there was no video except for one video, which many white people saw and reacted to negatively, which was, oh, look at this, he did the robbery before, and he intimidated the store clerk and stepped toward him, and so therefore the image, the video matters, and video worked against Michael Brown, and it worked for nothing worked for either of them. They're both dead men. What strikes me is I don't know why this isn't maybe it is being talked about. It seems so obvious that prosecutors who work with that jurisdiction of police officers to get their cases done cannot prosecute officer-involved shootings, ever.
That seems very logical.
I mean, so remove it, come up with either in that jurisdiction an independent panel that handles only officer-involved shootings and never interacts with police officers in any other way, or you simply go outside the jurisdiction and it's done somehow in the next county over does it. Yeah. But it probably should be more than that. And it may well be that here's the deal with the big giant federal government, that the feds need to do it, that there needs to be an arm of the federal government that's sole purpose is to investigate and choose to prosecute or not prosecute officer-involved shootings. Because it's very clear that the prosecutors who work hand in hand on a daily basis with the police trying to achieve the same goal are going to have a very difficult time turning around and prosecuting an officer they work with, or even an officer they don't work with, but they work with all his friends. It is an untenable situation. Yeah,
or
it seems so obvious.
If they work a county over or a state over, they work with the same sort of person with a different last name. Like I feel like there would still be, it might be better because they don't know them personally. They don't have to think about working with them in the next month or in the next year. But there would still be a bias, a level of trust, misplaced perhaps, that they have in the police, a level of respect for the competence they feel they have. I still think they would be biased, but it would be better than having someone who literally walks down the hall past those police officers on a daily basis.
Who they need that. Darren Wilson has probably, I don't even know the answer to this, but has probably helped McCullough in some other investigation because he was the arresting officer on a case he then prosecuted. Yeah. And maybe it doesn't have to be the feds, although that sounds instinctively like a good idea, although that will cost money. But it could be an independent arm the way, look, cops have grown to hate internal affairs. So theoretically, you could have prosecutorial internal affairs. And those people,
you got to have them outside the department completely.
Maybe, but you could...
Frankly, outside the present political structure completely, because in any town, city, or anything else, even if you open it up to elections, who's this board going to be, you're going to have the same fucking people every time.
Right, but they have managed to have cops at least resent internal affairs, so maybe if there were an internal prosecutorial wing that didn't deal with police except to prosecute them, they wouldn't feel it. Something needs... All those things are better, but I tend to agree that just let the feds do it. Just let not for civil rights violation. Now, we have a constitutional issue there. We'd have to... That law would have to be written, and we'd have to make that happen.
And conservatives, I don't think, would be in favor of that.
I'm sure they'd be all into it.
We don't have time to go into too much detail, but Eric Holder did announce there's going to be an expansion of some of the protections for profiling. Up until now, since 2003, I believe it was, race and ethnicity are barred from being profiled by federal agents. That is now being expanded for creed, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, and those sorts of things as well. Now, that doesn't rise to the level that we would like in terms of federal reforms when it comes to the criminal justice system, but it's another small step in the right direction, perhaps. Although we do have to point out really fast that special exemptions were carved out for areas of the Department of Homeland Security, like border security, airport security, so you can still be profiled in those particular areas.